Hi, everybody. This is Crystal Sutherland with the Journey to Heal podcast. And I am so delighted today because I am on this episode with Dr. Austin Strickland here in Wilmington, North Carolina. And Dr. Strickland owns a business that is called the Halo Method, if I'm correct. And he's coming on today to share a little bit about what his services do and in what way they provide help and healing for survivors of sexual abuse. So I'm super excited, Dr. Strickland, to have you here with us today. Tell us a little bit about you and your practice and the work you do.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I'm super excited to be on this podcast. Thank you, Crystal. Yeah. My name is Dr. Strickland, and I am a mind-body practitioner, and I operate out of my functional medicine practice. And all that means is we look at medicine, we look at healthcare in a much more holistic, root cause way to pinpoint exactly what we need to do to eradicate the abnormal process of disease or trauma. So that's what we do in this practice here in Wilmington. And I'm so excited to continue talking about this topic of trauma because there's so much of it, even outside of sexual trauma too, but especially with this topic, it is more prevalent than it really should be, or if, at all. And it's unfortunate that it happens, but the good news is that there are people like myself that work on this with women.
I love that. I love that. And so the name of your practice is the Halo Method. Is that correct?
Yeah. Well, there's no but it's Halo Method. Yep.
Halo Method. So tell me about the Halo Method. Tell me about what that is. What is it and who does it benefit?
So the Halo Method is a process that is highly effective. It's holistic and it's comprehensive in its approach to help chronic health conditions naturally. So that's the Halo Method. And it is comprised of a lot of different techniques congealed into one form. And it goes about working through the primary concern first, based off of what your body deems is the most important thing to work on. And we work through it. And so your body could actually de-stress naturally and gently as well. And so that's really what a lot of patients love about what we do here is they feel heard, number one. And then number two, they feel that result over time. It's almost like inconspicuous or, I don't know, interesting to go through that process, and they feel lighter. People feel different. They feel less emotional triggers as we work through with them. And it's different than talk therapy because your body stores memory as well, and not just the mind. So when we work through de-triggering these reflexes in the body, you no longer have to experience what you've been feeling for so many months and even years. So that's what we do here in Wilmington.
That's amazing. I love that. I love that. And what it sounds like, especially for those of us who have experienced sexual abuse, we contend with a lot of different triggers depending on our stories and what happened, and that can take a very long time to unravel and unpack through, intentional work, counseling, and sometimes just time, honestly. So I love that you can shorten the gap on that by providing this specific kind of, would you call it physical therapy? How would you describe it?
Um, I would not call it physical therapy.
Hmm.
It's similar in its approach that you're doing exercises and you're doing all that to get an improved result. But really, the real work is in the mind. And when we combine acupuncture, not with the
Okay.
needles, but we're doing acupressure with
Okay.
a gentle approach, and a little bit at a time going back into what you're experiencing, what you have experienced before, you'll see that your body can de-trigger and release that tension from the scenario that you came from. And so I wouldn't call it physical therapy. I am a chiropractor by trade, but we've
Okay.
done a lot of postgraduate work and all that stuff so that we can really work on people who have gone through a lot of trauma. So I would call it more of a mind body practice, or I'm a mind body practitioner, because physical therapy is working on the body primarily. And what we do is that we access both mind and what's going on inside the brain as they're, almost reliving this on a daily basis. We're working on that, and we're working on the reflexes of the body that relate to this experience they've had that was certainly not favored.
Right, right. Yeah, yeah. No, just sexual abuse, of course, it's horrible. And
Right.
so when you say, I just want to go down that trail just a little bit. When you say working on the mind and the body at the same time, describe what you mean by the mind, because I imagine that my listeners right now are wondering, are you talking about counseling? Are you talking, what do you mean when you say you're working on the mind while you're also working on the body?
Yeah. So, yeah, great question. So, what I would say is, picturing this example where you're driving on the road and everything's fine, everything's well, and all of a sudden you see a cop behind you coming up fast with their lights on. And what does everybody do? Everyone grabs the steering wheel a little bit tighter. Everyone's like moving their eyes, shifting their eyes. Am I out of the lane? Did I do something wrong? All that. And all of a sudden, the cop passes you and it's someone else. And you're like, whew, good thing it's not me, right? And so in that
Yeah.
experience, so in that experience, we're getting our hands a little bit more wet. Our palms are sweaty. Maybe we immediately start to sweat. We can no longer just have a gentle conversation because our body went through a whole experience. We have to stop conversation and just say to ourselves, am I doing something wrong? And so
Right.
I tell this example to everybody who comes in here with sexual abuse, because that is what's going on when your body remembers, either consciously, right, when you're thinking about it, or
Right.
unconsciously or subconsciously where you don't know you're thinking about it, but it's still happening in the brain. Your body
Right.
throws itself into this reflex. Your hands get sweaty. You might feel
Yeah.
sweaty. You might feel warm. You can no longer have a gentle conversation. Your body is experiencing a trauma reflex or a trauma pattern, and it's trying to
Right.
help itself get out of that discomfort it's in. So to answer your question about, like, what is it? Is it a counseling session? Is it something else? What we do is, and this is important to know for anybody that's interested in coming in here for that, we don't force any situation from happening. As long as you're ready for it, as long as you are okay with going into some scenarios throughout that process, or even not just talking. You don't have to talk about it either. What you could do is just really kind of remember gently some aspects that you're ready to go into, and your body will already exhibit those signs. I don't have to do
Right.
anything for that. And so
Right.
then,
Kind of like a, I'm sorry, kind of like a fight or flight. Your body will already, your nervous system already kind of goes into fight or flight when you begin to remember. You start getting anxious and you start
yes,
seeing the physical signs, like you say, of that trauma response. Gotcha.
yeah, that you would go into that fight or flight response. Sometimes you don't go into that fight or flight response, but your body is still going through a reflex similar to that. And
Right.
so, in whatever position you feel comfortable with, whether it's laying down on the table or sitting down or standing up or being in a room that you're more comfortable with, we would have that person go through that experience in their own mind. And then what we would do is, I do functional neurology in this practice, and we would go about understanding where is the trip in the system. So we just work through why that reflex is stuck in the body and why can't
Mhm.
that person move on. So I guess in this scenario, it's not counseling. We're not
Okay.
talking through the whole thing. We're not we don't need to hear anything, really. We don't need to hear anything, but we just ask that you may go back to, in your mind, kind of just not relive it, but just allow yourself to see where the trip in the system is as you're walking your own self through that scenario. And I could do neurologic testing off of the body so that I can understand where is the problem. So we do a technique called neuro-emotional technique, where that's how we could go through that experience and figure out why it's still painful, why it's still so extreme. Because I got to tell you that there's a lot of connections that the body makes through anything, whether it's a food allergy or the emotional response tied to that situation, or even before that situation. Your body just makes connections all the time. So sometimes this sexual abuse, unfortunately, was connected with another experience early on or after that. And it's causing your body to get stuck in this loop, this extreme abnormal function of the body, so that it really can't let itself go until you de-trigger it. So that's what we do here. Again, it's not counseling, and we don't do necessarily talk therapy, but if you want to talk about it, you can. And after the experience or after the treatment, really, you would feel more relaxed, you would feel more calm, you would feel even talking about it after a session, you would feel a little lighter,
Gotcha.
and not as extreme with it.
I love that. So, because a lot of, how I could venture to say all survivors of sexual abuse on some level suffer with symptoms of post-traumatic stress, right? And so they may not have the disorder, but they may have a selection of symptoms that they're having to deal with. And I know there's women that we've worked with that have taken EMDR therapy to help, address some of that. Some do talk therapy, with their counselor. Um, and some are just battling it on their own. They've not tried either scenario, and so they're struggling with how to overcome those symptoms of PTSD. And so it sounds like what you're providing is something that could be beneficial to people who have experienced sexual trauma, men or women. And of course, our organization, we primarily serve women. But this sounds like this could be very beneficial to men or women. I'm assuming that you serve both clientele, men and women.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yep. Yeah.
Excellent. And then, so, um, obviously, your services can help someone who's been through sexual abuse in terms of um, addressing some of the physical symptoms that they're or the trauma responses that they're struggling with. But what are some other ways that or are there other ways too that your services can assist people who have been through sexual abuse?
Yeah. So I'm just thinking about this question here. Like, how does our services benefit outside of what we already talked about? Our services. So what we do is we act a little bit as a nutritionist in our practice as well. So a lot of times when the body is stuck in these reflexes or stuck in this pattern of
Right.
post-traumatic stress, your body
Hmm.
tends to use and utilize a lot of nutrients related to stress. So a lot of that is vitamin C, a lot of that is vitamin B, and something called B2 or riboflavin. And so your body uses a lot of that nutrients or the vitamins there to support the process of stress, because you need a lot more in that time. Well, if you're going through it for months and years, well, it's no wonder why your metabolism is slowing down. It's no wonder why your body is fatigued all the time, or you're constantly irritable, because your body no longer has the sufficient vitamins, because it's been running through all these vitamins because of the stress. So what we see here is that a lot of times vitamin C comes into play, in other nutrition as well. We can go into a lot of that, but essentially the biochemistry is very important to support as we work on stabilizing the body and no longer having that abnormal reaction. So we do a
Wow.
lot of nutrition work, and then I'm a chiropractor by trade, so we would do some adjusting if that's needed. I'm not a heavy chiropractic adjuster. I don't mind doing it. But
Right.
if the body needs it, great. If it doesn't, then that's great too. So we just balance
Okay.
the body emotionally and mentally, biochemically. So that's nutrition and getting toxins out. And then
Right.
also aligning the body so that there's no stressor that's creating pain.
Interesting. Interesting. That's fascinating. How nutrition can play such a role. I didn't realize how your certain vitamins in your system can be depleted from the stress hormone. That is
Yep,
amazing.
absolutely. And it's funny, I'll
That,
give you a tidbit here too, that a lot of people, when they're really stressed, what does everyone want to do? Everybody wants to either get a pizza, they just don't want to cook
yeah,
anything that night, right? After a long day of work.
right.
Some people, they go for alcohol or whatever, right? To just de-stress. Well, a lot of times your body craves sugar, and it's craving sugar not because it's just addicted to sugar. It's craving
Right.
sugar because the molecule of glucose or sugar in the body is very similar, and it goes to the same receptors as vitamin C would. So vitamin
Uh,
C is very similar to glucose or sugar in the body. And so your body's actually trying to get vitamin C because the adrenal glands where the stress hormone is produced mostly is pumping out a
right.
lot and it needs support. Well, your body actually wants vitamin C, but it calls for pizza or it calls for bread or pasta or chips because that is a similar structure to that vitamin. So instead of grabbing a pizza, just have a couple of grapes or just have an orange and or two or three, and you'll be shocked to see that in a matter of 5 to 10 minutes your body is no longer craving that, and the stress is a lot more sedated.
Interesting. Oh my goodness. Okay, wait. I gotta process this a minute because all right. Almost all of my listeners, I can imagine, are right now, there's an epiphany that has just occurred. So we're just gonna let this marinate for a minute because for me, my struggle throughout my entire healing journey has been comfort food, particularly sugar. And I write about it in my book. And I have overcome it in a large, big way, but it's still there, and it's still, I guess you could say, a pathway. I thought it was a pathway in my brain. Now I'm realizing my body's actually screaming for sugar. And yeah, oh, Lord have mercy. All right, wait a second. I just got to sit a minute. Oh, my lands. I did not know that. All right. So, just to recap, what you're saying is when our body is feeling that stress hormone, which is cortisol, right? And so, when that's flaring, because we've been triggered by, or our symptoms of post traumatic stress have been triggered in some way, and we're feeling all the things. And I'm just talking for those of us that are survivors of sexual abuse. Basically, what's happening is our body then is craving vitamin C, but we think sugar. So we're going for the pasta, the bread, the donuts, which totally guilty of that, cake, anything that's quick that we can stuff in our mouth and to calm ourselves down. But we don't, but we tend to go for the, like you say, the breads, the things that are probably more carbohydrate driven, which will eventually turn into sugar in our system, or just plain sugar.
Exactly.
Wow. So really, the better thing we could do for ourselves is go for those grapes, orange, anything that's got vitamin C in it that's natural and good.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And oh man, see, this is so big, Dr. Strickland, because for a survivor of sexual abuse, and particularly women, what happens is we get on this cycle of self-abuse, and we don't even mean to. We're trying to cope. So it's a coping mechanism, basically a bad coping skill for us to turn to sugar. trying to calm ourselves down, trying to relax. And it doesn't even have to be stress over our past. It could be stress in the present, just managing kids or job or whatever. And we don't know how to manage stress well. So our go-to is that donut, that pizza, that whatever. And then for women, especially after a certain age, we can't lose the weight very fast. And so we are then in this conundrum of this constant, this vicious cycle of we're gaining weight, we're trying to soothe ourselves, but we're gaining weight, and then we begin to hate ourselves because we've gained weight. And so then it just, I mean, that's just really, really hard. So then that brings on a lot of other horrible feelings, right? For people, particularly women. So this is really, really big. So, listeners, I just want you to just take this in for a minute. Grapes, grapes, and oranges, not donuts and pizza. Let's do this. We can do this together. When we're having a bad day and we just want to go eat some sugar, let's find some natural things. Okay, so this is really big. I appreciate that so much, that information. So that's something that you do. A part of the Halo method is definitely, um, addressing physical uh, uh, trauma that's held in the body, but also addressing nutrition or combining nutrition, healthy outlooks on nutrition and healthy patterns in fueling your body and satisfying those urges to go for something unhealthy to calm ourselves, but learning how to reach for something healthy. That's so good. That is so good. So it sounds like you also educate people that come into your practice.
I do a lot of education, and you're not going to find this knowledge a lot of times on Google or Yahoo.
Right.
It's it's unfortunately not as popular as it should be, and so I work with patients a lot with education of why this happens, and this leads to this because of that process, and just like we talked
Right.
about with the vitamin C, I do that all the time. And so the light bulb goes off for a lot of people like, oh, that's why this happens. And there's a lot of validation in that. There's a lot of,
Yeah.
okay, now I understand. Okay, now I can finally take charge of what's going on because I now know the pathway.
Yes, yes, yes. Oh, and education leads to healing in many ways, I believe. It's just exactly what you say. I preach the same sermon to women. The more you can know about trauma and how it affects the body, the more you can educate yourself on what you've been through, and how it affects your mind, body, and your spirit. The more you can begin to take some intentional steps towards healing and really. I guess not continue to stay on the hamster wheel. What I think is like a hamster wheel or cycle of abuse and even self abuse. So
Exactly.
many things there. I love that. That's wonderful. I'm so grateful that you do that and that you provide this service in our community. So I got another question for you, and that is, what would you say for people what are some of the common symptoms? Because I think for those of us who have been through any form of sexual abuse, it's such a, there's such a stigma around it. People don't talk about it, at least not in, openly. We don't hear this discussed in society. It's kind of like what you talked about, just a moment ago. I mean, what you do is not clearly discussed or openly shared on, Google. You can't just research this information easily. And so it's kind of the same in terms of healing from sexual abuse and common symptoms of sexual abuse and common struggles for survivors of sexual abuse. And we just don't get to talk about this stuff openly. So a lot of times what will happen is people who have been through this, they're going to feel like, oh, I'm the only one who's gone through this, or I'm the only one who's struggling with this, or I'm abnormal because this is happening. So maybe we can waylay some of that for our listeners right now. And what would you say are some of the common symptoms or struggles that you find your clients are coming to you seeking help with?
So, because I don't just deal with sexual abuse cases,
Right,
I
of course.
also deal with neuropathy. I deal with thyroid conditions and hormone imbalance and gut health and all this stuff. So a lot of times what will happen is that they'll come in to me with, at this point, when they reach me, they usually have a good understanding of not just low back pain or headaches or whatever, but it's an organ
Right.
issue or it's a mental issue or whatever. They understand that now. So they'll come to me with, I've been having kidney issues and I'm on stage 3 kidney disease. And, can you help me with that? Or my thyroid is, fine one day and 2 weeks later, it's crazy. And so what we'll find is that we take those issues and we trace it back to what is the cause for that excessive stimulation in the body or that disease pattern. And so then we'll start to uncover that a lot of those cases do have forms of trauma in them. So a lot of times the disease in the body is not because of, like that example of the kidney or the thyroid
Right.
or the small intestine or the stomach. It's not starting there. It actually started 10, 20, 30 years before that or more. And a lot of times it's from a mental and emotional abuse that was not registered to us as abuse, but our body set into motion that every time this happens or something similar to that happens, I get stressed out. And when that happens, your body can no longer heal at the same rate of it being damaged just from the environment. And that's what happens that 10, 20, 30 years later, you start having those kidney dysfunctions or thyroid issues or whatever it is. So I got to tell you that I test everybody on trauma because it's so prevalent that, and nobody is talking about it. Nobody's actively, proactively working on this. That we're just doing that for the first half of the treatment, essentially, is decoding that, unraveling it, pushing it out, and not having it come back. Because when you work on that stuff first, that really sets the stage of finally getting better.
Right. Yeah,
So,
because then you kind of know what's going on. Once you can get it established that somebody's been through, you can get to the core issue, and then you kind of probably know from there, okay, well,
yeah.
this is happening, this is why it's happening. I love that.
And I don't know if it's something that your readers or, sorry, listeners want to hear, but let's just say, for the kidney dysfunction, a lot of times people feel a lot of fear and a lot of paralyzed will and a lot of dread or bad memory. And because of that, there was a researcher back in the 80s. Her name was Candace Perth. And so she actually proved that there is molecules of emotion, so fear or paralyzed will or bad memory or dread, that get created in the brain, and then it affects the kidneys or the bladder.
Wow.
That happens with anger, with the liver, happens with resentment, with the liver gallbladder. And then even so, a lot of women with the shame cycle and reoccurring shame and going through it constantly, that shame and false pride or wounded pride or bullied or anything like that, that's related to a lot of endocrine hormones too. So then you start getting thyroid issues and you start getting the stress and you want to crave a lot. So it happens in almost every emotion that you experience. It goes to a certain organ and it starts to irritate it. So,
Wow.
yeah. So
That's amazing.
she wrote a book, and it's called Molecules of Emotion.
Molecules of Emotion. Okay, I'm going to put this in the show, but I'm writing this down. Molecules of Emotion, and then tell me her name again.
Candace Pert. It's either Pert or Perth.
Okay.
But yeah, she did amazing work, and that is the basis of neuro-emotional technique, is what I do.
Amazing. Oh my goodness. Dr. Strickland, this is extremely helpful. This is extremely helpful. So in my book, I address shame. It's just to me, this is amazing to me. I'm just having a moment here because I address shame and the importance of identifying what we're really ashamed of. It's not just that we've been sexually abused. There's something else. It usually can pull on a thread and you can follow it to like a core thing that we're ashamed of. And sometimes for people who have been sexually abused, it's because their body either responded to the abuse, which is just natural. That's just the way we're made, and we can't, that's involuntary. We can't help that. But there's shame tied to that, right? Because intellectually we know that shouldn't happen, but then it happened, right? So we feel somehow responsible. But then the other might be that we perpetrated abuse, acting out what happened to us on someone else. And that can be obviously shrouded in shame. And so shame is something that really has to be dealt with but I always approach it just from an emotional and spiritual level. But I had no idea how much it affects the body. That is amazing. And it's the same thing with anger and resentment. I did know like ulcers and certain chronic diseases and things like that can be tied to, holding that in the body, and why it's so important to address it, acknowledge it, work through it, somehow find a healthy release for it, and ultimately forgive. And that's a hard thing, but it's an important thing because if we don't, it's like drinking poison and expecting our offender to die. It just doesn't work like that. So
It doesn't.
yeah, it just doesn't. And so it's for our own good, physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, to work through these things and address these things. And I just love what you have shared here. And I want to encourage our my listeners here today. If you are listening to this podcast, I believe it's meant to be, because I don't do this weekly or even monthly. I'm so sporadic on it. And so if you have come across this podcast, I believe you're supposed to be listening to this, and the Lord would have you to hear what Dr. Strickland is saying. And if you're not local to Wilmington, North Carolina, we'll kind of talk here in a minute about maybe some ways you can find someone like Dr. Strickland. But if you are local to North Carolina, Wilmington in particular, and any of this resonates with you, I want to encourage you to set an appointment with Dr. Strickland and just have a consultation at minimum. And we'll kind of talk towards the end of how you can get a hold of him, because there's no need to continue to suffer when there are resources like the Halo Method out there. There's just no need to continue to suffer. And it's better to go ahead and begin to address these issues and do what you can to care for yourself where you are in your healing journey right now. So I know my listeners are going to be wondering about this. So I'm going to go ahead and ask you, let's just say, for example, that one of my listeners reaches out to you because she recognizes some of these things she is struggling with. Thyroid issues or gastrointestinal issues or something along those lines, and she thinks it might be connected to her trauma, and she wants to come and have a consultation with you, maybe even set up some treatment. In your general experience, how many, what would that look like, for a listener or someone who comes to set that time up with you? And how many sessions generally should someone expect before they start seeing some results?
It's so hard to just put a label on it, and I wish I could. But so in my experience, though, what we found is that within, I would say conservatively, within 4 or 5 sessions, they're starting to feel different about the whole situation. And
Right.
sometimes during that process, we can actually have that experience of anger or sadness or shame come right out on the surface. Because sometimes we're asking a lot here. We're asking a lot to go back through it. And I know that's not an easy thing to do because somebody just doesn't want to think about it. And again, we don't have to, we're not forcing that issue either. We can still work with you if you don't want to get to that point. But anyway, it's about 4 or 5 times that they start to feel, you know what, I'm not carrying the burden that I used to. Like I had a lot of shame, and I might still have a lot of shame, but I could feel more comfortable in my own skin. And that's really
Right.
powerful for a lot of people. So I would say 4 or 5. I've seen people after the first session feel a lot better. And I've
Right.
seen people who have needed it for an extended amount of time because it's not just this experience, it was also tied to a mother father thing and what the mother father also went through. And so it's that generation and that generation because the emotions get passed down from the parents as well. So sometimes you got to deal with multiple generations. Anyway, with
Right.
that being said, I would say 4 or 5 comfortably is a good, you're going to start to feel more alive. You're going to start to feel your self worth come back, all of those things.
That's amazing. That's amazing. Well, and I think just to kind of, be able to give people some scope, like, okay, is this going to be, because a lot of the women that we serve, I'm not kidding, Dr. Strickland, they have been seeing counselors for years, years, not 4 or 5 sessions, but years. And for the most part, I think there's a lot of healing, a lot of growth, a lot of good that comes. But I've had some say, that they've had to skip from counselor to counselor, or they've had to take a break and then come back to it, and they're still struggling, with some very serious, painful elements of their story, and my heart just goes out to them because I know it can feel like, wow, when is this pain going to end? And a lot of the people, that I've encountered through the years, have been doing this now for, I'd say safely 12 years, but 9 years since my book came out. And I will tell you, like, oh gosh, so many times I get asked, uh, not this specifically, but essentially what they're asking is for a magic pill. They want the pain to end. They want it to stop. So I love that you're able to kind of say, you know, obviously not giving any promises, but just giving kind of a scope that you're looking at beginning to kind of turn a corner or see a difference or feel a difference, within about 5 sessions. So I love that. That's beautiful. So you shared this one resource of Molecules of Emotion by Candace Pert. Is there any other resources that you would recommend for women who are struggling with some of these symptoms that you've described? Aside from setting up a consultation with you, what would be anything that you might, say it's a woman that's struggling with stomach pain or lower back pain, or I don't know, maybe even just fear of seeing a doctor, of
That
just
does happen too. So I would say, outside of consultation, there's a great resource on YouTube. It's a
okay,
documentary, 1 hour documentary, and it's called NET dash stressed. So it's net dash stressed. And that is
okay,
going to walk you through in an easy, digestible, layman's term way of why these things happen emotionally and mentally, and how it transfers into disease patterns later in life. So
wow,
that's a resource that is actually fun to watch. I have a lot of my patients watch that, and they always come back with a vigor to get this done and over with because they finally understand, okay, this is why this happens. Like, I just want it done. So
wow.
yeah, so that's a great resource, and I wish I had others. I mean, if they want to read this other book, it's called, maybe you've heard about it, The Body Keeps the Score.
Yep, yep, yep. Yeah,
So
I
that's another.
we highly recommend that by Dr. Besser Vanderkolk.
Yes.
Um, is another one that we recommend to the women that we serve. But I'm going to put all of this, just addressing to my listeners, and then Dr. Strickland, just so you know too, I'm going to put all of this in our show notes, and I'm also going to put a direct link to your contact information so that local people can connect with you, right away. But I know that there's a lot of people who are not local to Wilmington, North Carolina, that tune in, to the Journey to Heal podcast. So can you maybe just share, number one, how can they connect with you, those that are local. But then number two, what would you recommend for the person who's not local in trying to find someone like you that provides this kind of service?
Yeah, absolutely. So I do want to say I do work with people that are outside of this area, and I do a telehealth setting in that way. But I do understand that some people just want a hands-on experience, and that sometimes, and I will even say this to them, that sometimes it's actually better for them to, get that adjustment, because sometimes it's actually locked in the vertebrae, believe it or not.
Yeah.
Sometimes the adjustment is actually keeping that reflex on. So sometimes you need to be in person. And if you're okay with seeing another doctor, that's what I would have you do. There's a website out there. NET is the organization that I learned this from. So they have practitioners all over the world that do this. And so
Okay.
the website is called NET, so netmindbody.com. And
Okay.
there's a section in there where you can search for a practitioner in your area. And there's not everyone in the world is doing this. So you might only have somebody an hour away or 2 hours away, or you might get lucky and there's someone 5 minutes away. But that's a good
Okay.
resource in case they want to work with someone else that's closer to them.
Love that. And if they want to work with you, how can they get a hold of you?
Yeah, so what we can do is they can go to our website at myhalomethod.com, and they can go
Okay.
there and just understand where to contact us with our phone number or email. We love to get contacted by either email or phone number, and just leave a voicemail for us so we know it's you. And yeah, that's how we get started with that. We also have a Instagram, so it's halo_method. And so we post a
Okay.
lot of information and education there on various topics. And yeah, that's pretty much it. We have a Facebook too, but the Instagram is also related to the Facebook, so it's very much the same.
Yeah, connected. Yeah, I love that. Oh, I love that. This has been so informative and helpful. I've learned a lot in our conversation, Dr. Strickland, and I really, really appreciate it. I appreciate your time and seeking us out to connect and share about your services here locally. And I'm excited. I want to just really thank you for joining me today and being a part of this. Truly means a lot.
Yeah, absolutely, Crystal. Thank you.
Yeah, yeah. And then for those of you that are listening, listen, check out the show notes. All of this information that Dr. Strickland has been so kind to share as far as resources and how to contact him, and certainly about the Net Mind and Body .com website, that's going to be there for you. And this is, of course, on the Journey to Heal podcast. You can listen to this as many times as you want. And I hope that we will be able to have Dr. Strickland back on again this year. If you have questions for Dr. Strickland that you would like for us to address in a second podcast episode at a later time, please send me an email at crystal@journeytohealministries.org, and I will collect that information and we will address those questions the next time we chat. But at minimum, I hope that if you're listening today and you're suffering from any of these symptoms and things that Dr. Strickland shared about, and you just need somebody to give you some professional advice and wisdom, I want to encourage you to seek out Dr. Strickland with the Halo Method, or someone local in your own community if you prefer. It's just far better to go ahead and address those situations and get the medical care that you need than it is to let it just continue to marinate in your body and your mind and your spirit. So anyway, thank you again, Dr. Strickland, and I'm so delighted that we were able to have this conversation today, and I look forward to next time. Bye for now.